So Alanna, this story really grabbed my attention right off the bat because I was just surprised to hear that there are companies out there that will finance a pet.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard about it for cars and for furniture and for appliances, but I had not heard of this either, that a living thing could be leased or financed. So that's when we started looking into it, and we found this practice has actually been here in Texas since 2017. One store has been offering it since then, and we since found a few other stores that are starting to dabble into this practice.
So how forthcoming were these companies when you started asking some questions?
So they were very open about the fact that they offered different payment plans. They said, hey, we want to make these pets affordable for all people, so we're going to do this thing where it can be accessible for you. The question, though, is what is entailed in these payment plans, and that was very hard information to get.
So I'm guessing that this is the type of story where to really understand how the business works and that interaction between the customer and the salesperson, it's not something you simply can do the traditional Q&A or ask on an email.
And in this instance, the owner, we approached her multiple times and we said, hey, we would love to do an on-camera interview with you. We'll drive to Houston, which is where the store is based. And of course, they only would communicate through email. So we wanted to see for ourselves. I felt uncomfortable doing a story about this practice without truly understanding how it works. So I went undercover and we went to the store in Garland, which recently opened after Thanksgiving. And then we went to the flagship store in Houston. So we got a feel for both locations and what they offer.
So explain to people when you say undercover, what does that exactly mean? Because you're not pretending to be someone else.
I'm not wearing like a mustache and glasses and like,
Right.
Wearing a costume. Like, I'm very much myself. And I would say that anybody who does this undercover work, we know the ethics of this. Like, you cannot lie at any given moment. Like, I can't give a fake name. If someone were to ask me if I was with the news, I would say yes. And I would say, yeah, we're doing a story on it. Did anybody ask in this situation? No. We're never lying. But I would say, I went in, I wore my sweatpants. It was like Saturday morning at 10 a.m. So I think pretty unrecognizable. And we just asked honest questions about what's going on, how does this work? And we got a feel for things.
So were you nervous at all when you went undercover?
No, I don't think so. I think just on other stories that we've done, you kind of get used to it, and there's nothing to be nervous about if you're telling the truth and if you're being open and honest and not deceitful about it.
So what did they tell you about how this all works?
So they said that their dogs start at $6,500. That was one day in Garland. And they want to make it affordable for people. So right off the bat, they said financing is an option. If you can't afford it, that's okay. We'll approve you in a couple of seconds. So they pull up this little online form from a lending company. And they said, yeah, just fill out your social security number. If you have a husband, put his income in too. And we can approve you within seconds. So you can walk out with that dog today.
So what kind of finance deals are these? Are we talking about, are these loans? Are these leases? What are the parameters of the deals?
Yeah, it's super complicated. So there's not just one company that they're working with. They're actually working with 3 out-of-state companies, and they all vary in what they offer in agreements. There are some that are straight financing. Others are leasing. Others say they actually offer you a loan. So I do think it's kind of pick and choose. It's based on your situation and what works best for you, and that's what you can go with. So I know that for me, I went through the process too because I wanted to find out, well, how much information do you get from these companies? So I called 2 of them. And I went on the phone and I tried to fill out the online application, and it was really interesting because they offer completely different things. Like, so someone told me that I was approved for a loan, and I was like, I didn't know that. I thought I was just like getting, trying to get my credit under. I don't know. It was really confusing, and I kind of knew what I was getting at, and I can only imagine how confusing it was for people who don't know what they're getting into.
The folks that you interviewed, what kind of deals did they sign up for?
So Luis Ortega, who's kind of the main focal point of our story, he got a very cute dog. He found that his APR was 151%. So he found that out after it was made, after he walked out with that dog. He said he received an email from the finance company, and those were in the terms that the APR was 151%. So if you do the math, ultimately, the payment is going to be twice what he thought it was going to be. And of course, that's how finance agreements work. But I think anybody can agree that 151 is a high number. And I know that in some other companies, just depending on which one, I asked about interest rates. Some companies were more forthcoming than others. One company full out admitted our interest rates go from anywhere 20% to 200%.
200%.
200%. And there are variations of that, and it is technical, but I think and I said, how do you get around usury laws? How do you get around the caps, the statutory caps in certain states? And this one salesperson said, well, it levels out after a period of time. If this is some sort of a retail installment contract where there's a time differential, the more you pay and the more payments you make, the interest rate goes down. Again, the difficult part about this story, Brian, was that we never actually saw these agreements. The companies wouldn't send them to me. So we're going off their word. Is this true? Is this legal? Is this acceptable? I guess we have to take their word for it because they wouldn't show us the paperwork.
So when you went in there and you asked about this finance, so they're not giving you kind of, hey, here's the contract, you can take it home and look it over, or when you're on the phone, did they ever say, hey, we'll send it to you so you can take the time and look it over?
I did not see any paperwork that would have been given to me in the store.
Yeah.
I know that customers I've spoken to say they were given documents. Those documents pertained more to the health of the dog. I understand that this dog received veterinary care, but nothing about the specific financial terms of what they would pay in the long term. I know several customers said that they went to go get the dog and all of it was done online, and the employee was at the helm of filling out those online forms, but they weren't shown, here is the paper contract, here are the terms. And that was the problem that they had, that they couldn't walk out of the store with a dog and a full contract outlining the terms.
So I got to go back. You mentioned leasing. Now, the way a traditional lease works is that you pay to have possession of an item, I guess in this case, a dog, for a specific time period. And then when your lease is up, or if you don't make a payment, that item goes back to the company.
Yeah. So this is another gray area where I asked the company point blank, do you repo dogs? Because when you think of a lease and you don't upkeep the terms of the lease, things can get repossessed. They said they've never repoed a dog in their history of operating. But the interesting thing is, we did ask, so at the end of the lease, do you own the dog? Or do you have to have some sort of buyout provision in order to, take that ownership? And they said, well, you got to talk to the finance companies about that. That is between the customer and the third-party finance company. And we did find one person who filed a complaint with the AG, the Attorney General's office, who said she noticed some sort of a buyout clause, that it was never actually hers until you pay extra.
Now, you interviewed a couple different people that had gone through this, and one has purchased a dog through this. How concerned are they about losing this pet?
The person that I interviewed for this, he did financing, and he feels pretty good that this dog is his. He never articulated, hey, I'm worried about this.
Right.
He's worried, he says that I can make the payments, we can get through this. But what about all the other people who have no idea about what's about to hit them? And he believes it takes advantage of people who may not understand all of the financial lingo or like the legalese involved with these contracts. So I think he's okay, but I know there are other people who have communicated in writing to the state.
Right.
I don't know if this dog is mine or if it will be mine even after I pay for this.
And I know the story, we've talked a lot about this story in the I-Team office, and I think people people keep going back to, the idea of, wait, we're financing a pet. Like, it's one thing, a car or a home or leasing, these are, possessions.
Yeah.
And I guess a dog is the same way, but there's a certain attachment to a dog that the idea that there's a possibility that it could be repossessed or something just is hard for a lot of us even to kind of comprehend that that's out there.
And that's different from a car or from a washing machine. This is what sets that apart. There's an emotional attachment here, and that's what consumer advocates and victims say really got them hooked, because you fall in love with the dog, especially if you're a dog lover. You drive all the way to the store, you play with it, you create an attachment. And then even if you do get some subsidiary information about paying long term, I mean, it's emotional at that point. It's chemical. So it's a little more difficult to separate yourself from, say, a couch that you're financing.
Yeah. Are there any consumer protection laws? Did you find any that may apply in this case?
So we did sit down with an attorney for this piece, and he said that there is a Consumer Protection Act in Texas that does govern over this. Whether this store violates that, that's not up to me. I'm not a lawyer. But what does govern this is, was there a misleading practice involved in this sale?
So what did you kind of take away from this story? From when you started, and I know a lot of these stories, you start with someone that calls in or writes an email. When kind of you finished investigating and found all these answers, what was your kind of overarching takeaway?
This is a new practice in Texas, relatively new. It is actually starting to bud out all over the country. We've seen it in California, in New York, and a lot of state legislatures have started to ban this practice. And I think this is a new frontier that Texas needs to reckon with. For better or for worse, I mean, maybe they'll decide, hey, we love this practice, let's keep it. But it is undeniable, I think, that legislators must realize, are we okay with this? And is this practice being done in a reasonable, fair way to protect consumers? Lawmakers have actually started to file bills about this practice based on this store in our story. So they are going to be weighing, should we ban pet leasing, period.
So this story is not over?
No, I don't think so. I think it's only the beginning.